All right, I'm gonna take my mask off and stay far away.
Used to be
Okay.
a separate country. That's Pittsburg. Yeah,
Is
they
that
were
what we-
upset with being taxed by both the US and Canada, so they declared their own independence for a few years.
Yeah, you're giving my talk. Can you tell we're married?
How many towns have you been to?
He only came to about 2/3, so.
2/3. That's a lot. That's a lot.
And I've read the book a few times.
There you go. Okay. So we are, everything seems to be working. So let's do this. Hi, welcome everyone. Welcome. Thank you for coming out today to the Gilford Public Library in this strange setup we've got. For those online, we have a handful of people in the room watching this program in person. And then we have those live on Zoom, and also we're streaming it live on Facebook, but people could also watch it later as a recording. So however you consume this, we're all very excited to have Anne Bottomley here today to talk about her journey through the 234 towns in New Hampshire, creating these drawings, these colored pencil drawings at each location, really setting like the signature feel for as she perceived it in each of these places. So we're very excited to have her. She's going to be talking about the making of her book, Colorful Journey. So let's give a warm welcome to Anne.
Thank you. I want to thank the Gilford Library for inviting me. Believe me, this has been in the works for months and months and months and postponed a few times, so I'm glad I finally got here. Although I have been here before to draw, something in your town, but the plan here today is to talk about this book, Colorful Journey, an artist's adventure drawing every town in New Hampshire. And people are curious as to how this came to be. What was the beginning? What was the middle? What was the end? Have I had any other ideas? So that's what we're going to talk about. At the beginning, I did not have any idea of making a book. Like a lot of books are like that, I think. They start out a small idea. So my small idea was just to explore my native state of New Hampshire. I was born here, went to UNH, got married, moved away for 40 years and very seldom came back because most of my family was actually in Massachusetts. So I hardly ever came back, and my husband retired. Artists don't retire, but we came back, decided to come back to New Hampshire, and I just started to explore. Now, I want to backtrack a little. I was a printmaker for years and years. I owned a very large motorized press. I made etchings and woodcuts, mostly in Washington, D.C. area, but also in England for a few years. But I sold that, and when I came back to New Hampshire, it was basically a what's next sort of stage of life. And I started just driving around and exploring and drawing whatever I felt like, whatever appealed to me. And one day I counted up how many towns I had drawn, and there were 13. I thought, I should probably just keep going. And then my next thought was, I wonder how many there are. I looked that up, 234. That includes the cities. I thought, I'm not very a numbers-oriented person, but I like to plan things. So I thought, if I do 10 per month for 2 years, I broke it up into these small little segments. I wrote 10 on the calendar every month for 2 years. And I didn't stop. I went all seasons, did some drawing in the car, things like that. So that is how it started. And they were very small drawings. And I'm hoping you'll see as we go along what my technique was, why I chose something, or how did I narrow it down, or things like that. I'm going to talk mostly about the art. The book has a little bits of history as well, or what was happening that day, or if I had any personal history, family history, like my parents were married here, something like that. I had a historical advisor from Dartmouth, Jerry Daniel. May have met him. He gives his own talks all around the state. I went to his house every now and then, and he would basically shoot down every idea I had about history, tell me where I was going wrong. So there's that. I think we're caught up on how I got started. And I draw standing up. Usually I don't have an easel or anything, and people don't know what I'm doing, and they either don't notice me or they think I'm up to no good or something. I'm a government, I don't know, inspector, I guess. So anyway, so we're starting out with a map of the towns.
Now that we're going to use the slides, let me just
Oh.
sneak in. I'm going to make
Okay.
so that those on Zoom can see the slides. There's a trick to this.
I'm sure there is.
There are two tricks to this. Keep talking while I fix it.
I'm not sure where I was in my paragraph.
There we go. I think you were talking about this slide, that there was the drawing of New Hampshire.
A map showing the boundaries of every town. I paid no attention to counties, basically. I had 2 or 3 maps to begin with. We bought an atlas to help us, and then we got even more lost after that. Because it shows every road, and you forget to notice that when it says unmaintained or things like that. So this is the map of our tiny little state with lots and lots and lots of towns. And I'm not going to spend too long on this image right here, but you can see the little ones near the seacoast where everything started, and a lot of towns sort of broke off from the little towns. And look at the ones along the Connecticut River. They just kind of make like a little parade up there. And then we already talked about the big one at the top, Pittsburg. So we'll be traveling all around the state. Hopefully you'll see places you've never been. You'll think, wow, how far away is that? And it couldn't be more than 2 hours at most. And then you'll probably, toward the end, see places that you recognize, hopefully. So we'll have a nice road trip here. All right, we'll see where we're going to start. Nothing happened when I pushed the button.
It must be something I did.
Ah,
You can't trust these technologists.
okay, is it going to work now when I
I
push?
believe so. Go ahead and give it a try.
Yeah.
Nice.
Okay, so just a little quick picture of my tools. Very simple, really. Sometimes I didn't even bring my colors with me, or the watercolors. Sometimes I did. Sometimes I draw with just a mechanical pencil or a ballpoint pen. I'm looking for the essence of a place. Sometimes it took me quite a long time. I'd drive through town, turn around, drive back the other way, and then go turn around and go to, it's like a crossroads. Usually both towns have a crossroads. So I did a lot of sort of wandering around. And then I'd get out of my car and do some more wandering. So it usually took a while to decide what one image was going to represent that town. And I did go back and redo about 5%, which is not too bad really, what would that be, about 12. So here are the regions. I live in New London, which is in Dartmouth, Ossipee. It's only about an hour from here, but Route 93 is like the dividing line between the state, right? It's like the spine. So I live on west of 93. I started out, I did my 13 drawings in Dartmouth, Ossipee because I was just staying close to home. But when I started in earnest, I started out going to the Monadnock region because I didn't know much about it. I grew up, my family lived in Concord, so and I lived in Durham, so Monadnock was pretty far away for me. So I started Monadnock, and then the rest of the regions I did kind of sporadically in less of an organized fashion. But well, first we're going to start out in New London. No concerts on the green this summer, but hopefully next summer. New London is on a mountain ridge. There's mountain views from all directions. It's kind of nice. What looks like a church is the original building of the Colby-Sawyer College. There's our bandstand. So, and here's like a good example. I draw people if they were there, you know, but a lot of the times when I was drawing in the middle of the week and the middle of the day, there'd be no one there. So New Hampshire's not a terribly populated place, so a lot of times I didn't draw people. I drew architecture, mountains, streams, whatever I liked. I mean, being an artist is a great privilege because you get to do what you want. I mean, it's mine. At this point, I didn't have any idea for a book. I was just curious, you know, about what each town looked like. There's another one. This is a small college in our town. They try to keep 1,000 students coming. I think they made their quota for this year. Anyway, here's one I did in the winter, obviously. Sap buckets. They have a college course in Colby-Sawyer for how to make maple syrup, scientifically based course. I sat in my car and I drove my car sort of back and forth, getting the best view of each bucket. Nobody questioned what I was doing, and I mean, this is New Hampshire. People don't worry. Up in Hanover on the Connecticut River, I didn't know that there would be students all over the town green, but there they were, and they were staying pretty still. I think some of them might have been asleep. They were telling themselves they were studying, socializing. So I just stood on the sidewalk on the edge of the green and rapidly sketched their little bodies and the architecture of Dartmouth. I think I did the color at home, and no one notices me, you know. When you're just standing there with a little sketchbook, usually I don't attract a lot of attention, just sometimes. All right, so now we're still in Monadnock. You see they're nicely labeled by my husband down there. This is Antrim. Has anybody been to Monadnock region?
Long time ago.
Yeah. Antrim, you know, is a city in Northern Ireland. There's a whole swath of towns in New Hampshire that were settled by people from Ireland. It's Derry, and let's see, Antrim. Let's see, there's Londonderry. There's a couple others I forget. But anyway, Antrim was settled by a guy from Antrim, Northern Ireland. I think it was Ireland at that time. And, I knew what I was going to draw when I got to Antrim because my sister and I have always exclaimed over how beautiful this hardware store is, and they make the most gorgeous arrangements on Main Street. It looks like art or sculpture or something. So there they are. And the man who owns the store is pretty happy with that too. This is Bennington, a tiny little place. A lot of towns in New Hampshire used to be part of something else and then they broke away. Bennington was like that. It's very small in area. I put this in because I wanted to draw this mill because, you know, New Hampshire was full of mills at one time, working mills, and textile and paper. This one is still in business. The last paper mill still in business in New Hampshire, and they make good quality paper. They won all kinds of awards for their green practices, and my husband and I make cards out of my images, and we use paper from this mill. So I like that mill. Hancock. It's pretty close to Bennington. Hancock is a tiny little place. It's near Peterborough. It only has one street as far as I can tell, and I don't even think it's paved, but it's charming. It has an inn, a library, a store, a meeting house, and a very unusual bandstand. You know, once you go to every town, you start seeing things that either look the same or, oh, never seen anything like that. This is a unique bandstand, so it was probably designed by somebody in the town. There were pattern books for all sorts of things in the 1800s, so you start seeing a lot of similarities. Either there was a very popular carpenter, or people got their hands on a pattern book, and they started designing things themselves. Or some of the meeting houses, if a town thought they needed a meeting house, they would get together in a wagon and go visit a few that had already been built, and said, well, I like that one over there. So you start seeing similarities in buildings. I like this particular meeting house with its double doors and its nice brick facade. Harrisville is very nearby. Anyone been to Harrisville? It's well worth taking a road trip over to Monadnock. Harrisville is a mill village, like, you know, there were hundreds of them. Every town in New Hampshire had and lots of mills, basically, because of the fast moving streams. They used the water power to work the equipment inside the mill. Most of them were textile mills. So anyway, Harrisville is still making yarn. So it's one of probably the only one, I think, that is still producing its original product. And at this point, I was standing inside a building that sells yarn and looms and things like that. I don't do any of that, but I like these old brick buildings, and I like mill villages, and it's got a general store. It's a highly functioning place. There's a lot of housing in there. A lot of artists live in these old buildings. The white building with a flat top is the town library. I was going to say I was standing in the building that has the mill rush going underneath the building. So the whole building was sort of shaking the whole time. And you wonder how it's been standing all those years. It's noisy too, so I'd like to go back there. I got to have another project of going back to all these places. All right, I wanted my husband to take a picture of me. See, here I am standing there with my tiny little piece of paper. This is in Marlowe. I'm drawing that statue. It is unusual in that it's a statue of a World War I soldier. I didn't see any others like that. And the town hall is over on the right in that little tiny, what should I say, roof that sticks off to the left that leads into the town library. So I could write a book all about libraries, I think.
Would you like questions during the presentation or all at the end?
Basically all in the end, but now I'm just dying to know what you want to know.
Well, I've got 3 questions. One, what is the typical size
Typical size of my
of your drawings?
paper.
Of your drawings,
At that time, I was doing like 6 by 8.
right on. And about how long would something like that take you?
How long did that take me? I think I did the color at home because most of the color, I can remember the important parts, and the unimportant parts are unimportant, or I
Right.
can make them up. So I did the color at home. So that, and when you're busy making art, you lose track of time. So I'm only going to just guess. I'm going to say 20 minutes, 30 minutes, something like that.
And the last question was, were the libraries your favorite subject to draw?
I think so, because they're all so different. And, you know, a lot of them are small, but they have a modern addition out the back, so you can't see it from the street often. It's very well done. Yes. Yes, I would say, yeah, I could do a book about libraries.
Thank you. Oh, be quiet till the end.
There is a library near us in New London. I didn't include it today, but I'll tell you about it. It's so tiny. It has no running water to this day. It has the original library, and there's a mine in Danbury. It's still functioning, I think. But anyway, point is, there's a fireplace in this tiny little library, like it's like one room, all made out of mica. So beautiful. So the libraries have all these treasures in them. Yes. Not to mention friendly, happy, educated people happy to tell me all about their town. Who's been here? Yes. Now, Robert Frost, who is from actually San Francisco, graduated from high school in Lawrence, Massachusetts. His wife they were co-valedictorians. She wrote poetry too. Anyway, Robert Frost lived in about 20 different places. He had quite a few children. His grandfather bought this house for him, and because he thought he should stop moving around. He had all these little children. He thought, I don't know, poet father, all these children, maybe they should just stay in one place for a little while. So he bought this house for him and said, it's yours, with one condition: you have to stay there 10 years. We stayed there about 10 years and 1 day. Then he moved to Plymouth, and then he went to England for a while. So anyway, back to this particular building. It's open, the grounds are open all year round. The inside has been restored with the help of Robert Frost's daughter. There's a table in there next to a stove, and they say that's where he wrote his poems, you know, after his kids were in bed. Sit next to the warm stove. It's very evocative to go in there. You know, you look out the same windows he looked out. It's nice. And then the building, or the whole situation here, is run by a family, and they're all Frost enthusiasts, of course, and they will spout off poetry at the drop of a hat. So that's very nice. One other thing to say about this is that while I was drawing this, I was being filmed for New Hampshire Chronicle. So there was a cameraman about 6 inches from my face. Mind over matter. Trying not to be distracted by this guy right there. It's available online, if you can see it anytime you want. And I was just on Chronicle in May again. So there's pictures of this visit in 2012 and an update. I was updated myself in May. So it's 8 years ago that I was on Chronicle. Very, fun. It was, what a memory that is. And I didn't cheat. I didn't go there in advance and decide what I was going to draw. I just kind of, why not have the adventure of figuring it out while the camera was on me. Manchester. This is Millworker. Well, obviously it says Millworker Housing. Right across the street from the Amoskeag Mills. You might not even know they're there. These are like there's 2 areas of enclosed a square, shall we say. It's called corporations. That was their word for this mill housing. I can look at it and I can realize, or I can tell I did it in the winter, you know, there's no leaves on the trees. Bright sunny day, cold. I like the shadows from the windows. See, every shadow is a little different. Every window is a little different. Every door is a little different. I like repetitions of things. That I always say repetition is the glue that holds the composition together. It's like music, you know, when you repeat the notes, patterns. I put the guy in at the last minute. Somebody walked in front of me and I just put him in there. And he kept walking, of course. Doesn't know. But I love brick buildings. I have certain things that repeat and repeat because I just like them the best. More brick buildings. Nashua. I like turrets. I like pointy buildings. I like turrets because it seems amazing that you can build something that just hangs off the corner of a building like that. It's been there, I don't know, at least 100 years, I suppose. I'm far more interested in the tops of buildings than the sidewalks. I think you can see that. When I was a kid growing up in just over the line in Massachusetts, we used to go to Nashua because they had stores there, you know. There was no shopping malls. That was they had department stores in Nashua. That's where we went for our big city experience. More brick buildings. This is a library that shares its library with Tilton. You knew that. This library was built late 1800s. I only exaggerated the chimney a little bit, you know. I was in my car, it was raining. You know, on the calendar, when I said I was gonna go off drawing, I usually went no matter what the weather was, no matter how bad the weather was in our town. We have our own weather because it's a high elevation town, so I always thought, well, when I drive downhill, it'll be much better, but it's not always the case. Sometimes it was just as miserable someplace else. But I can draw in the car in the rain. You have to park the car just right, you know. See there's a modern edition off the back. But I love brick, you know, the thought you can take mud and bake it and then build things with it, and they're so sturdy. And a lot of these brick buildings are like show-off buildings. It says here my connection is unstable.
Yeah, let's ignore that and see what happens.
Okay. All right. So anyway, this is like a show-off brick building. There's all kinds of ornamentations and fancy bricks. Tilton, right next to Northfield. Anybody been to Tilton? Yeah. It's not very far from here. You may have noticed all these statues as you drive through the town. Right now, these statues have masks on, but I've yet to figure out who made these statues. I just know who paid for them, Charles Tilton. And the one on your left is supposed to represent Europe. He did all the continents, I guess. The one on the right, the amazing one on the right, represents the Americas with the most enormous, lizard or salamander I've ever seen. She's supposed to be an Indian queen, I think is the name of this. It's in the middle of a roundabout, small roundabout. So I had to stand there like this, ignoring the cars. I think it was raining too. The middle one is Squantum. I thought that, I just learned today that statue is actually tin. I thought it was bronze. It's just bronze color. But some of them have been moved slightly. They used to be in more prominent locations, and Squantum now has its own little park. But anyway, it's an amazing thing to see all these statues, and let's just admit it, they're very quirky. That's what I like about New Hampshire, not afraid of quirkiness. We embrace it. Lee is near Durham, where I went to college. I like crossroads and meetings, and lots of roads that meet all in one place. 50s. There's a lot of telephone wires there. Most people can recognize this if they know Lee. I usually don't draw the telephone wires because I don't notice them. It's not that I'm censoring it, I just don't tend to focus on it. I think sometime in the future there will be no telephone wires, so it's all going to be okay. The thing I like to tell people about this drawing is the barn is red because red oxide pigment was inexpensive and locally procured. The brightly colored houses at this time in the early part of the 1800s, having a bright colored house was actually a status symbol. It meant you had a lot of money to buy a lot of pigment. So you ordered the pigment from England and then you made your house as bright as you possibly could afford. So they weren't white. A lot of the buildings at this era were either unpainted, entirely unpainted, frankly, because they expected them to burn down anyway, or they're brightly painted. So this idea of white houses is not of that era. I learned that from my historian professor. Newcastle. You've all been there, right? The only town in New Hampshire that's just islands. Let's see, talk about the arc here. I like that rock with the birds on it, and I like the lighthouse, but they weren't very close to each other. So I moved the rock. That's the good part about standing there. So you can just go like this. Makes you go. I think if I was sitting down, I just wouldn't do these things. So there is a story. I'm hoping I won't forget too many parts of it. Paul Revere rode out from Boston to warn the people in Newcastle that the British were coming. And they took out a lot of gunpowder and cannons.
4 months before Lexington.
4 months before Lexington. Yeah. So Paul Revere.
Lexington and Concord had better public relations.
Paul Revere made his first trip on horseback to Newcastle. Across the river, that's the Piscataqua River and Maine on the other side. Newington. Now, Newington, for a long time, I thought it had no center at all. I thought it was just big box stores on Route 4 as you head in or out of Portsmouth. But one time we saw this little tiny sign that said Newport Town Center. So we drove here and there it is. There's nothing there except the library, the church, and a school. The people of Newington, England sent over a bell to put in the bell tower when they built that little church. The library has since got a nice new addition. I have drawn it, but I just like this little one better. The important, you can see the planes, from the Peace Trade Port. So you're in this quiet little place, except there's planes over all the time. I do want to mention that while I was drawing this, my husband Bruce was inside the library building meeting the director and learning all about how to make a book. By this time, I'd gotten the idea, well, maybe it'd be nice to put all these things in a book, except I don't know anything about books or publishing or anything. So after I got this idea, I started talking to a few people, do you know anything? Do you know how to do this? Everybody said no. Only one person said, that'll never happen. I ignored her, thought, I'm just going to keep asking until someone tells me they know how to do this. That's how you get through life, right? You have a problem, you just keep asking for help. So finally I met somebody who said, oh, I know how to do that. I know somebody who would like to publish that. So anyway, his name is Scott Campbell, and he was the director of Newington. He's now in Plasta. So he told me about a guy in Portsmouth, so I'll tell you more about that in a minute. New Market, just south of Durham. Oh, just another one of these mill towns. The mills are now repurposed into all sorts of things. Housing, small businesses. We're in, at this drawing, we're in the Cracked Skull Coffee Shop. You can see it's winter. You see the snow and the shovel. I liked looking out through the windows, and I liked all the things that were attached to the walls. Musical instruments, the typewriter, and the woggled up pieces of paper. It had, character. Portsmouth. This is the door of the Athenaeum, which is on Market Square. I like doors, I like windows, I like bricks. This got everything for me. While I'm drawing this, I like to imagine who designed it. How long did it take them to decide how many panes of glass? And then you have to think about, well, who cut the panes of glass or who made the glass? And I can keep going on like that for quite a long time. It wasn't too long after I finished this book that I got, actually it was 4 years. I decided to write a book all about Portsmouth, just Portsmouth. So I wanted to show you a picture of Tom. Tom Holbrook is standing next to me there on Market Square Day in front of River Run Bookstore, just off Market Square on Daniel Street. Tom has a sort of a sideline of publishing books. It's called Piscataqua Press. He has published hundreds of books. I'm the only artist. The rest are short stories, poetry, mysteries. He runs a contest or competition, and the winner gets their work published. So he and I took almost 2 years to work through, well, who was going to print it? How was that going to work? So we had, and I wouldn't say it went too smoothly. We changed our minds 3 times because you want the finished product with art, you wanted the colors to be correct. And our first printer was in Massachusetts, and it was, I'm going to say, the old-fashioned kind of printer where they open cans of ink, not digital. And they couldn't give me a sample of what it was going to look like, so I refused to buy it. So my books are printed in Nashville, and they're printed digitally. So I can buy a lot of them if I want to, but also they're available online. So if you go to Amazon and you order one, the factory in Nashville prints one. Now, so nobody has to keep boxes and boxes of these. Bookstores keep a few. I keep a few. But, it's a whole different world. And the colors are accurate. Digital colors, So, it's a good thing I didn't get this idea 10 years ago. So anyway, the book was published in 2014. This is my last town, Rollingsford, not too far from here. It's on the Salmon Falls River, right on the Maine border. Another textile mill. Right now it is Artist Studios, and the town library is in the building. I don't think they had a library before that. I think I read that. Anyway, look, it was the only time I saw my shadow with my hand and my pencil. I thought that was pretty interesting. See the river on the right there, that's the border with Maine, and a lot of the workers for the mill would walk across the bridge to go to work and then walk home again. So now we're gonna go head up to the White Mountains. Bethlehem is over pretty near Vermont. I told you I like repetition of shapes, so we've got, as soon as I saw these little turrets that kind of resembled the mountains, I thought, okay, that's it. I was standing in a golf course. Nobody noticed me. Bethlehem advertised itself as a allergy-free zone. They said they were so high, such a high elevation that nobody would have any allergies if they came here. So this is how they promoted themselves, in New York City. Come to Bethlehem where your hay fever will disappear. Conway. I had to draw that building because it's just so bizarre. The only time I drew myself, besides that other one where I had my shadow, put myself in there just to have a little foreground, balance it all off. This is the railroad station, of course. Conway promoted itself as, a resort. And for me, it's interesting that a lot of the hotels, I'm going to say every hotel there, had a live-in artist. More or less. They probably didn't live there, but they had a studio there, right in the lobby. So they would go out in the day and paint the mountains and bring them back and let them dry, and then they were for sale right in the lobby. So it was a very high-class souvenir, you might say. And when we went to Jackson, which is nearby, there were artists all over the place still, just like 100 years ago. Littleton, who's been to Littleton? Yes, it's nice. Very nice main street. This is across the river, the Ammonoosuc River on the other side. It's a place to park. And then I like the way that the covered bridge looked and the old buildings which are being restored. And do you know about the library there?
No, I don't.
Oh, there is a statue of Pollyanna at the top of the stairs, greeting everyone.
World's longest candy.
Oh, yes, they have an opera house, they have the world's longest candy counter. There's all sorts of reasons to go to Littleton. This is the cover of the book. Franconia is a place in Germany. I don't know why. New Hampshire, this is the name in New Hampshire. This is the Franconia Range. I think this is Mount Lafayette, possibly. But the important thing is this is the view from Robert Frost's house. I told you he lived in a lot of places. He lived here in 1915 after he moved back from England, after he had published 2 books. So he had some money and some fame, and he quit teaching. And his house is now called Frost Place, and they have poetry workshops there, things like that. And that mailbox is his mailbox. It says Frost on it in his handwriting with black paint. And I keep thinking, and it's getting rusty, they really ought to take that indoors. But still, it was nice to see his handwriting. Colebrook. I can remember going there as a child with my grandfather and uncles. I don't know why. But anyway, it has a nice main street. All these, just the kind of houses I like, colorful, quirky, weird, unusual windows. I don't think it was fall when I was there. I just wanted more color, so I made all the leaves orange. The interesting thing about Colebrook is that we were staying in a motel. I think it was a log cabin motel. And I happened to hear the man at the front desk mention the word Fritz Weatherby. He said, Fritz Weatherby, something about he's staying here right now. I thought, really? So I asked him if he would give Fritz my card. So he did. And then he gave it to the producer, and then the producer called me. So that's how you get on TV in New Hampshire. It's not that hard, really. It's a small state. but I didn't meet Fritz. No. All right, Northumberland. Pretty high up there, pretty near Vermont. This is a paper mill. And, well, I should start out by saying we were very confused. On the map, it said we were going into Northumberland. And as soon as we got there, all the signs said Groveton. So we went in the library and said, where are we? They said, this is the village of Groveton in the town of Northumberland. So some villages become more well-known than the town, actually the town. So I drew this because I learned in the library that this paper mill was about to be torn down. So I was acting as a visual historian here. And it is. It has been torn down. So now there's a park there and next to the covered bridge. I thought it was important to, to draw it, get it down on paper, so to speak, the paper mill on paper. Pittsburg, giant in area town at the top of the state, next to Canada and Vermont and Maine. This is a snow roller. You all knew that, right? Okay. All right, good. Someone said no, so I'll tell my story. They didn't have plows in the olden days, in the days of horse carriage. They just rolled the snow on the roads flat, compacted it with this device. You'd sit up the top there and somehow attach some horses to the front and, I don't know, say a prayer, I guess. And that would flatten the snow. And at that time, winter was considered the ideal time to get out and visit your neighbors because it was so much easier to get around. Spring was the worst with all the mud. But and the rivers or the lakes were frozen. I don't know about the rivers, but the lakes were frozen. So that was often the time that they moved houses. They moved their buildings in the winter too, across the frozen lakes. But anyway, so, at this time, I'd never seen a snow roller. I'd heard about it. If I see something interesting that I've never drawn before, I'm likely to just draw it and enjoy the complexity of the whole thing, because drawing is all about looking closely, trying to understand what you're seeing and how to interpret it in a few lines. And it has a nice little roof over it, see? This snow roller, which was out in the elements all those years, now has its own nice little roof. One more thing about Pittsburg. It was its own country for a few years because Canada, which was, part of Great Britain at the time, and the United States disagreed about where the headlands of the Connecticut River was. And so they both claimed the land and they were taxing people twice. Each country was taxing residents and they got fed up with that. So they decided that they would be their own country. So they declared that they were the Republic of Indian Stream, and they had their own constitution and currency for about 5 years in the 1800s. Finally, the U.S. Somehow went out. Stratford, another library, see? It wasn't open. I would have liked to have gone in there to see what they did with how they made their railroad station into a library. But this is way over on the Connecticut River. Not much else in Stratford, a church, a general store, and a library. Whitefield. More pointy buildings. I just can't seem to resist. And here we have an unusual bandstand. The bandstand is really bigger than that. Somehow I got a little contracted. But I had a lot of people watching me as I drew this. suspicious of me. Usually, I'm so intent on drawing it, I usually forget to wave and look friendly and hold up the drawing. So lots of pyramids here, lots of triangles, gluing it all together. Pretty close by, we're getting close. Alton Bay. I had to do this one because this building was owned by my husband's aunt and uncle in the 1950s or 40s or what?
Mid-50s.
50s. But it was, they called it Busy Corner, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, now it's called Amy Lynn. It's been, that's what it was in 2012 anyway. At the time I was drawing this, it was motorcycle week, and I just drew between the motorcycles. I didn't know how to draw a blur, so I just decided against it. Center Harbor. I'm really, really poor at three-dimensional art. I'm much more of a two-dimensional person, but I like it when other people do it. I like statues. I like to try to draw statues. This is in the middle of a very small traffic circle, right between an ice cream parlor and the library. And it was raining, and I was there drawing in the rain, sprinkling. This is supposed to be an Indian boy giving a friendly hug to a goose. And around the base, it says something like, to protect innocent or animals in need, or I think maybe they raised money for animals. It was done by a student of Augustus St. Gaudens. Anyway, sometimes it was just so good to get out of the car and go read signs and go read labels. Eaton. You've probably all been there. Yeah. A college friend of mine is the postmistress here, so I came to visit her for the first time. The town, evidently, this was going to be torn down, and the town people bought the building, restored it, painted it red. It is now the post office, a store, and a restaurant. And as I got ready to draw this pretty nice looking antique car pulled up, I should draw that first in case he doesn't stay there long. He did stay there, so. Anyway, Middleton. See, when I went into these, each town I usually had no idea what I was going to draw. There's a few exceptions, like Derry. But anyway, when I got to this lake, I think it's called Sunshine Lake, I just liked all these little rocks because I'd never seen a lake that looked like that. So that's all I need to get me started. And you can clearly tell what season it was. And Ossipee. Ossipee frustrated me. There's so much to Ossipee. It's all spread out all over the place. Couldn't seem to find the center of it. Sometimes we did research before we went, but it really doesn't stick in my head until I get there anyway. So I just picked the most colorful buildings I could find. I always fall back on color. And I've seen pictures of this particular square. In about before the railroad came to town. It was all grass in the middle, but they paved it all over. But I've had people from Ossipee tell me they recognize it, so that's what all that matters to me. Tamworth, charming little place. Another kind of like a one-street town. It has a Lyceum, which is kind of like a general store, I guess, a restaurant, and then I walked down the street, and when I got a little farther down, I was across the street, I decided to take the library building and turn it. around so you could, as if you were looking at it straight on. So occasionally I would do that. I would draw in segments as I walked down the street. So another advantage of not taking one photograph and going home, you know. You can just take your time and come up with some idea that you hadn't had before. There, you've been waiting, right? Waiting. I drove past this today, so now I know that they removed the funny old gas pumps there. I think it's got new owners. Doesn't look quite the same. So, see, I'm recording history in 2012. This is what it looked like approximately. And I was sitting on this little triangle of grass underneath some pine trees, and I like places I told you where lots of roads come together. While I was sitting up there, school let out, and all these kids walked by. And they didn't know I was there, and I guess I'm sure they didn't care. But anyway, I could overhear all their conversations. I think it might have been the first day of school, so they're all excitedly chattering to each other and catching up. And I just liked the sound of it. So I tried to put them in. I kind of made up the figures, but I put them in to remember the day and the sound of the children. And that's the end of my pictures. I have a few more things to show you. If you want to take a note, colorfuljourney.art. You can find me online anytime you want. I put new pictures there sometimes. Now I would just like to take a few minutes to move that table over, if you want to. I think I've got 5 minutes, that'll do it.
Let's first, I'm gonna turn the screen share off, so that's down there. There we go.
So. These are wheels. Yeah, it's on wheels. I can do this myself.
Or would you
Okay,
rather?
I just have to have some place to stand.
Why don't we do that? I'll just point it towards you.
All right. So, 5 more minutes of show and tell here.
You're good.
Am I good? All right, so after, let's see, where's my book? And now I'm moving out of the picture. This took 4 years, as I told you. But once you learn how to do something, things get quicker, right? So I decided to write another book, sort of a motivational. Now, it is not as thick as this one, but this one took 6 months. Because I just wrote down all the things I tell people all the time. People who have, much more light, okay?
Yeah, that one's good. And then the next one.
This is, I
Okay,
wrote
in the
this
middle.
for people who've taken art
Never mind.
classes.
You got it right for the last one. Sorry.
And have the supplies and then frustrate themselves because they don't do as much as they would like. So I just wrote down, so it's not a how-to book. It is a book of why you should, what good things will happen if you do. Get stubborn, get self-important, get brave. Reconnect with your past loves. There's one page here that says give up napping. That's for when people go traveling, you know, with the other family members. When are they going to find time? Everyone else is taking an afternoon siesta. That's when you do art. So that was next. Then I seem to come out with one of these every 2 years. Then I did the one in Portsmouth. I should say, this is important, my husband over there keeps all the files, and he takes all my drawings and kind of, we scan them, and then he gets rid of shadows and smudgy bits and things like that, and then he remembers where they are. And then we send them to our daughter in Los Angeles, who is a graphic designer. So she is the one who makes the files ready for the printer. So we're like a team of 4, us and Tom in Portsmouth. This is my newest one. Last year we went to the Galapagos, last year when we traveled. This is supposed to be a replica of my sketchbook, see? And then I just brought a few other sketchbooks. I brought this because I thought you might recognize that building.
For sure.
I thought it was really from the 30s, but evidently it's not. It's made to look like Art Deco. And just a couple more things to show you. Sometimes when I travel, I use an accordion sketchbook. It's tons of fun.
Do you make your own?
No, I buy them. They cost about $7. I mean, you can make them. I have made them.
Who makes that one?
Who makes that one? I don't know. You can just buy them a Dick Blick. But you can't. I have made them. You obviously just take a piece of paper and fold it up.
Yeah.
But I'm not very good at making the covers.
Yeah.
So colored pencils, usually I use water soluble because they're more fun. If you put water on them, they turn into watercolor. I use all different size sketchbooks. Like right now I seem to be drawing red leaves. So it becomes like a diary, I put the date in here, and I started this one in June. And it'll probably take me another month. I think we might be on to the questions.
Absolutely. Does anyone have any questions?
I do. Was there anybody in your family who inspired you to become an artist?
Your
ancestors.
My ancestors. Well, my family was very sort of artsy craftsy. Everyone made something. I thought everyone was an artist when I was a child. So I would just say it was sort of part of my growing up. There was always paper and pencil and ink and colored things. I'm just like a child who never stopped, A lot of children stop when they're about 12. I'm trying to get our grandchildren not to do that. Any other questions? Nobody's gonna say, what's next?
What's next?
What's next? Well, I've done an awful lot of drawings of New London this summer because I haven't left town much. So I've kind of walked up and down Main Street and drawing of all the little gardens and, like a lot of towns around here. Every little business is in a former house, so that it's kind of picturesque, I guess you could say. So I discovered there's a lot to draw when right close to home. So that's what I've been doing. So do you think anyone has any questions online?
So we don't have any questions on Zoom right now, but if people are asking questions on Facebook Live, people are welcome to do that, and those we can answer later.
Okay.
We'll answer if we can, but we'll reach out to you, and you can also comment on the same page.
Oh, I suppose I ought to tell you where you could buy these books if you were so inclined. You can buy them online, Amazon. I told you they'll print one for you. Or you can buy them in independent bookstores like Gibson's in Concord, River Run Bookstore in Portsmouth. Yeah. And I've given a lot of them away to libraries, a lot. So there's about 50 libraries in New Hampshire that have this one, and a lot of them have that one. This one's too new, and this one I never had enough of. So.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Thank you very much for your presentation. Really thrilled. I think it's fascinating. So
Thank you.
appreciate it very much. Let's give a warm goodbye. I'm going to be closing this stream. Thank you for joining us on both Zoom and Facebook Live. Have a good night.